The night had fallen like a heavy curtain over the small, isolated cottage where I had chosen to spend a week of solitude. With each passing hour, the winds outside howled and the trees scratched at the windows like skeletal fingers, trying to claw their way inside. I had grown up in a city, and this remote, countryside cabin was a welcome escape from the constant chaos of urban life. But now, in the dead of night, I was beginning to question the wisdom of my decision to be home alone. I was seated in front of a crackling fire, the only source of warmth and light in the room, its flames casting eerie shadows on the worn wooden walls. The solitude was oppressive, and the silence seemed to have a weight of its own. It was as if the cabin was holding its breath, waiting for something sinister to happen. I had stocked up on supplies before arriving, ensuring I wouldn't need to venture out into the desolate darkness. As I listened to the wind's mournful lament and the occasional distant hoot of an owl, I couldn't help but feel the isolation of my surroundings. I tried to dismiss these thoughts, reminding myself that this was a much-needed retreat from the noisy city. My unease deepened when the clock on the wall struck midnight. The chimes echoed through the cabin, but it felt as if they also echoed in the vast, eerie wilderness surrounding me. An irrational fear took hold of me. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched, that eyes in the darkness were fixated on my every move. I decided it was time to retire to my bedroom. The narrow, creaking staircase that led to the second floor seemed like a pathway to the unknown, and each step I took was met with a sense of trepidation. My bedroom, small and dimly lit, provided little comfort. The bed seemed too inviting to resist, so I crawled under the heavy old quilt and pulled it tightly around me. I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the eerie sounds of the night, but then I heard it. A faint, muffled whisper, like a spectral voice that carried from the darkest recesses of the forest. My heart began to race, and I strained to listen. The voice grew stronger, but the words remained unintelligible. It was as if the forest itself was speaking in a language that only the wilderness understood. I dismissed it as a trick of the imagination, the product of isolation and darkness. However, as the minutes turned into hours, the whispering continued, growing more insistent, more sinister. It was as though the very walls of the cabin had become a conduit for the voices of the lost souls that haunted the woods. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of this unnatural intrusion. A bitter chill ran down my spine when I noticed that the bedroom window was slightly ajar. I had closed it securely earlier, but now the window had been pushed open just enough to allow the night's cold breath to seep in. Tentatively, I approached the window and peered outside. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, leaving everything shrouded in inky darkness. I strained my eyes to see, and that's when I saw it. A pale, faceless figure standing just beyond the window, its shadowy form swaying like a specter. The whispering grew louder, almost a chant, and the figure seemed to beckon me, inviting me to join it in the moonless abyss. Panic seized me, and I slammed the window shut, bolting it as if my life depended on it. My heart was a wild, erratic drumbeat in my chest. I retreated to the bed, trying to convince myself that it had been a trick of the imagination, a play of shadows and fear. But the whispers continued, now emanating from within the room, a soft, haunting chorus that seemed to come from every corner. Desperation gnawed at me as I searched for the source of the voices, but there was none to be found. They echoed and swirled around me, surrounding me in a tormenting crescendo. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a nightmare from which there was no escape. As the hours dragged on, the voices grew more malicious, and their words, previously indecipherable, took on a sinister clarity. They spoke of ancient secrets, forgotten curses, and the pain of those who had ventured into the woods and never returned. The cabin's walls seemed to close in on me. The very wood of the structure seemed to breathe, to pulse with a malevolent presence. With trembling hands, I grabbed a lantern and made my way downstairs. The cabin's interior had transformed into a macabre spectacle. the shadows dancing in a grotesque pantomime. As I approached the front door, I noticed that it was slightly ajar, and a rush of cold air greeted me like an icy breath. I pulled the door open, and the night revealed itself in all its malevolent glory. The darkness outside was oppressive, and the trees, their gnarled branches silhouetted against the moonless sky, seemed to reach out for me. The whispering was now a cacophony, and it was clear that it was not coming from inside the cabin, but from the very heart of the forest. Terror gripped me, but curiosity drove me forward. I stepped outside, my lantern casting a feeble circle of light in the inky blackness. The voices grew louder, more frenzied, and I realized they were coming from the depths of the woods. I followed the voices, moving deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me, and the path I had ventured down became a labyrinth of shadows. My lantern flickered, casting eerie, elongated shadows on the ground. As I continued, I came upon a clearing, and in its center stood the pale, faceless figure I had seen at my window. It stood motionless, its featureless form radiating a chilling aura. The voices reached a deafening crescendo, their words a maddening chant that seeped into my very soul. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to look away from the figure. It beckoned me with a spectral hand, and I felt an irresistible pull drawing me closer to the abyss. The whispers promised knowledge, power, and a communion with forces beyond human understanding. I hesitated, torn between my fear and a perverse fascination with the unknown. But just as I was about to take that final step into the abyss, a sudden realization snapped me out of my trance. I turned and fled, leaving the forest and the haunting voices behind. Back in the cabin, I sealed the windows and bolted the door, trying to banish the nightmarish encounter from my mind. I huddled in my bed, trembling with fear and disbelief. The voices continued to whisper, but they remained outside, a menacing chorus that taunted me from the darkness. The night stretched on, and I prayed for the first light of dawn to arrive and banish the horrors that had beset me. I had ventured too close to the secrets of the forest, and now, in the quiet of the night, I knew that the cabin was not a refuge, but a prison, a sanctuary of shadows and voices that would forever haunt my dreams. As the first rays of morning sun finally broke through the oppressive darkness, I knew that I had narrowly escaped.